Hi, I'm Jonah, and this is a Learn to Play tutorial for the paddle song. Now I'm going to be playing this on a Merlin flute in the key of C, but again, like all these tutorials, it sounds great in any key. Some of this, if you're going to play it in a lower tone, you might play it a little slower. I'm going to play it a little more upbeat because I'm playing it on a higher tone flute. Now I'm going to play through it once, and then we'll go through a little introduction of the tutorial and how to use it, and then we'll go right into the tutorial. Now, the easiest way that I find to learn songs is to work through them phrase by phrase. Now, phrases are like sentences. You put a bunch of sentences together to build a story. In the same way, you put a bunch of phrases together to build a song. Essentially, each time you pause to take a breath, you've completed a phrase. And because in the music we've added these breath marks, you can easily see that the phrases begin and end at each of these breath marks. I've also noted the number of the phrases using these numbers with lines through them. Phrase 1, 2, and so on. As I walk through each phrase, I'll note anything that's unusual or particularly challenging in that phrase, and then I'll show you how to play it, and I'll play it at a really slow tempo. And at that point, I suggest pausing the video and working on that phrase until you have the fingerings and the rhythm pretty well down at that slow tempo, and then move on to the next phrase. Once you move through the whole song, I suggest going back to the beginning of the song and working through each phrase again. And each time you do that, your hands will memorize the fingerings a little bit more, and you'll memorize the rhythms a little bit more, and the song will get easier to play, and you can start bringing it up to tempo. This is a note that some of you may not have played before, and when you come to this note in the song, have some patience with yourself. It might take a little time to learn the transition from the note before it to this note and then to the note after it. I'll also be talking more about this note and the transitions as we walk through each phrase. This is the tablature for the paddling song, and you can download this tablature using the link at the bottom of this webpage. Or if you're on YouTube, in the description is the link to the webpage where you'll be able to find this tablature as well. I would consider this song to be an upper beginning to lower intermediate level song, and mostly it's just because of this note right here and the cross fingerings that are required in order to move into this note and out of this note. And it's not just right here. We see this note throughout the song, and there's going to be different cross fingerings moving into this note and then out of this note. And those cross fingerings are what make this a beginning to intermediate level song, because the rhythms are pretty straightforward. So if you've been playing the native flute for a little while and you're comfortable playing in the pentatonic scale, that scale that we all learn when we first learn to play the native flute, this song might be a good way to push yourself to start learning some cross fingerings as well. Now, the paddling song is not meant to be played just one time through, and I know that because of this repeat symbol here at the end, these two dots with the line after them. And when this repeat symbol tells us is to go back to the beginning of the song and play through it again. Now, if it was meant to be played through more than one extra time, there would be a 3x or a 4x in addition to this repeat symbol. That being said, feel free to play it through as many times as you like, and to make the song as long or as short as you like as well. Now, if there's a lot of variations on repeat symbols as well. Sometimes there's different endings that you would play the second time through versus what you play the first time through. Sometimes the repeat doesn't take you back to the beginning of the song, but takes you somewhere else in the song to repeat a specific section of the song. And as those come up in sheet music that we work through in the Learn to Play video series, I'll work through those more at that point. Now, this is the first phrase of the paddling song, and I think the most challenging thing here is going to be this cross fingering going from this note to this note to this note. And here's a blown up version of the tablature for this sequence of notes. And if you are having trouble with this cross fingering, I suggest pausing the video here and working through this sequence a number of times until you find that your fingers are catching these notes easily. And your muscle memory is learning how to do that without too much thought. Here's the second phrase, and again, the cross fingerings are going to be the most challenging part of this phrase. And here is the blown up version of the tablature, so you can see those changes really clearly. And I'd suggest pausing the video here if you've been having trouble with these cross fingerings and working through them until your muscle memory is strong enough that you can move through them relatively smoothly. Another sequence of notes that could be a little awkward on the fingers is going from this note to this note and then back to this note. And the reason being is that while it's not a cross fingering, you're not closing holes and while at the same time opening other holes or vice versa. You're just closing holes, these two holes when you're going from this note to this note, or opening holes when you're going from this note to this note. But what makes it a little awkward is that you're using your ring finger on your upper hand to open and close this, what we call the sixth hole. And when you're playing the pentatonic scale, that scale we all learn in the beginning, you learn to keep that hole closed. So the dexterity of the ring finger has not been developed, so it can be a little awkward when you first start using it, as in a situation like this. This is the third phrase, and again, it's the cross fingerings that are going to be the challenging part. And what's nice is it's the same cross fingerings, meaning the sequence of notes that you've worked through before in the first two phrases are coming up again in this phrase. So at this point, your fingers will hopefully be catching these transitions relatively quickly. And you can see those transitions going from this note to this note and then back to this note again. Now there's also this sequence of notes going from this note to this note that we saw in phrase 2. And again, it's not as challenging as cross fingering usually is, but it might be a little bit to get used to opening that sixth hole. Now the other thing in this phrase that I'd like to point out is this symbol here. And this is a tie that's connecting these two notes together. And what it tells us is that we don't tongue in between these two notes. So instead of playing this dotted half note, holding it for 3 beats, tonguing, and then playing this half note for 2 beats, we play them both together in one. And essentially it becomes 5 beats. And you can see that here underneath the tablature where it's being held for 5 beats. This is the fourth phrase, and this phrase is pretty straightforward. There's no cross fingering, the rhythm is pretty straightforward. We again see this tie here, but instead of being drawn over the 2 notes like it was in phrase 3, it's being drawn under the 2 notes, but it's symbolizing the same thing. And here we are at the last phrase, phrase 5, and a very simple phrase composed mostly of the same notes. You just do one note change and it's on a rest, so that really helps make it easier to make that change. And then playing the song the first time through, we play all the way to the end and we hit the repeat symbol that I talked about earlier, and then we're going to go back to the beginning and start the song over again. Now the second time through, I like to just stop on this note here and end the song here, because for me it feels like this note gives the song a feeling of finality and a finishing of the song, where if you move through and end on this high note, there's a lot of tension left, meaning there's still a lot of motion in the song. It doesn't feel like it's finishing a song. It doesn't feel like there's finality or a stopping point. And I think this note is here because on the repeat, when you jump back to the beginning of the song and start again, this note really ties the end of the song back into the beginning of the song. So the notation says it's not supposed to be played that way, this way that I'm talking about, where you're ending here. It's supposed to be played through to this high note. Otherwise, the notation here would be a little bit different. But because I think it gives it more finality, and the final example of the song that I play it in this way, where I stop on this note